Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 70 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. Today, I'm going live with a Week 2 preview show covering all the action on the NFL slate. For those of you that are maybe new to the podcast, this podcast will go out live twice a week. Every Tuesday night, we will do a full NFL review. I'll often be joined by my co-host Mark Henry Jr. for those shows. And then sometime either Thursday or Friday during the day, I'll be doing a week preview. Typically is going to be a solo show. So they'll be a little bit shorter just to kind of give you some talking points for each of the games and make my official predictions. Now, my official picks, maybe they're not worth much because I went 7-8-1 during week one. And so week one, there's some crazy things that happen. My picks definitely weren't on point during week one. And we're going to see if we can do a little bit better this week. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in. As we always do on this show, we're going to start off with the Eagles game. We'll give it more depth than any of the other games, but we will cover every team. So if you are not an Eagles fan, hang on, we're going to get to your team. We'll always have a few talking points for each one. But let's dive into the Eagles and the Minnesota Vikings. The Eagles host the Vikings on Monday Night Football in the second of the two Monday night games. It kicks off at like 8:40, I think. It's going to be a late night. And just by the way, keep it tuned here to the Painted Lines because we're going to have pregame, halftime, postgame shows all coming up, assuming anybody can stay up that late for a postgame show before work the next day. But let's dive into the Eagles matchup with the Vikings. Let's start off talking about the Eagles offense against the Vikings defense. The Eagles offense looked pretty good on Sunday against the Lions. They put up a really good performance. They put up 31 points. Obviously, there were 38 points scored courtesy of the pick six by James Bradbury Jr. I'm just now realizing that my green screen is taking out my green shirt too. So I am just a disembodied head floating here if you're watching. Looks a little weird. I'll try not to wear a green shirt again, but it does kind of look cool that the winning is for the birds just floating there. But yeah, that's a little strange. I'll try to keep that to a minimum moving forward. But thank you for pointing out that disembodied head. And you guys do sound off in the comments. I love interacting with you guys live on these shows and answering your questions as well. So be sure you fire those off. We'll throw them up on the screen and we can talk about them as we go. So back to the Eagles offense. The Vikings have a really good pass rush. They've got two good edge rushers in Zadarius Smith, who they acquired from Green Bay, who got some revenge on Aaron Rodgers last week in the Vikings-Packers game. And they have Danielle Hunter rushing off the other edge. And so that's something to watch, the battle between Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, and Zadarius Smith, Danielle Hunter. If they can keep Jalen Hurts clean, if they can keep him comfortable in the pocket, it's going to go a long way towards helping the Eagles offense. That said, the Vikings don't have a great run defense. They're not the most solid team up the middle against the run. And so I could see a pretty run-heavy script in this game for the Eagles. The Vikings like to run a lot of simulated pressures. And what that means, if you watched the Lions game last week, you saw the Lions putting cornerbacks right attached to the line, right outside the defensive end, or you saw them walking linebackers down to mug the A gap or mug the B gap against the center and the guards. The Lions were bringing pressure a lot. They were bringing these 6 and these 7-man pressures. Simulated pressure, which is what the Vikings like to do, threatens pressure, but it doesn't often bring it. Essentially what you'll do, you might have a linebacker standing on each shoulder of the center. Those are called the A gaps, the gap between the center and the guard. You'll have a linebacker standing in each gap, and at the snap of the ball, they see which one of them Jason Kelce moves to engage, and whichever one he moves to engage drops back into coverage, whichever one he doesn't rushes the passer. It's a way to neutralize a center or any offensive lineman, for that matter, by just making him wrong. In the same way that read options, where the quarterback is reading a defensive end. If he crashes on the running back, the quarterback will pull the ball and keep it. If he doesn't, he gives it off. You can neutralize a defensive end, take him out of the play. You make him guess, and then you make him wrong. That's what simulated pressures are designed to do for an offense. And so people are going to come. They're just not all going to come. They're sort of sharing responsibilities. the Vikings are going to run this a lot. They love to bring simulated pressures. And so it's going to test the Eagles' offensive line ability to communicate and to pick up pressures, which was a big issue in week one. Pass protection was an issue. Mostly, I think it went on the running backs. The Eagles' offensive line, a lot of people think they played poorly in this game. I'm here to tell you, the offensive line didn't play bad. They started the game a little slow in the first quarter, but they pieced it together. But Detroit was bringing lots of pressure, lots of overload blitzes, and you saw that magnified because Jalen Hurts liked to scramble instead of hit hot reads, and I've done some all 22 videos about that, so check those out if you want more information on that. And simply because the linebacker or the running backs didn't do a good job of picking up these linebackers on pressures. That said, Minnesota likes to sim pressure but not bring it. They only blitzed Aaron Rodgers on 10% of his dropbacks in week one. Jalen Hurts was blitzed on 50% of his dropbacks by the Lions. And so you're going to see a lot of the same looks that the Lions brought, but the Vikings are going to rotate out of those. They're going to spin their coverages behind it. They're going to try to muddy the waters for Jalen Hurts post-snap. And so that's going to be a big thing to watch, is how the offensive line is able to diagnose these sim pressures and how Jalen Hurts is able to quickly confirm or change his pre-snap reads, diagnosing those rotations afterwards. It can be a tricky defense to play against. That's why I sort of expect a run-heavy script, that coupled with the fact that they don't have the best run defense. And so I think you could see the Eagles running the ball quite a bit early, trying to establish that run and get the Vikings out of these sim pressure looks into more traditional defenses designed to stop the run. And then you could see the Eagles try to throw the ball downfield. So that's sort of what I expect on the offensive side of the ball. I do expect the offense to have a good game. The Packers only put up 7 points, but they just looked out of sorts. Don't forget everything I just talked about, the importance of your offensive line communicating. The Packers were missing both of their starting tackles. And so that played a huge factor in the game, as well as Aaron Rodgers' lack of chemistry with his new receivers. My real concerns for this game are on the defensive side of the ball. And it starts with Justin Jefferson. How do you defend Justin Jefferson? The Packers elected to try to cover him with zone coverages, and it simply didn't work. He led the league in receiving in week one, and he would have led the league in receiving at week one if he didn't come out of the locker room at halftime. He went off. Now, the good news for the Eagles is it wasn't like he was dominating Jair Alexander. Jair Alexander is one of the best corners in the NFL. The Packers opted not to put him in man coverage on Jefferson. Instead, they put a lot of zones. And so on 60% of his snaps, Justin Jefferson was primarily covered by either a linebacker or a safety. And that's a recipe for disaster for any team. It would also be a recipe for disaster against the Eagles. With the exception of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, there's nobody that you want to allow to try to cover Jefferson in man coverage at the linebacker or safety position. So he's so good against zone, I don't know that the Eagles have somebody that can cover him man-to-man. Now, that sounds like Darius Slay slander, and it's not. Darius Slay's a good corner, but Darius Slay has trouble with top receivers, especially guys like Jefferson, who are a little bit bigger. You saw DJ Shark moss him in the end zone for that touchdown. It was great coverage. Slay's just not often the best at the catch point, and Justin Jefferson's great at the catch point. So it's something to monitor. I think James Bradbury might be a little better matchup with Jefferson than Darius Slay is, but we'll see what the Eagles try to do. They have not seemed to really want to play tight man-to-man coverage so far. There will be snaps where the Vikings will put Jefferson in the slot, and when they do that, you don't want Avonte Maddox on Justin Jefferson. And so when he's in the slot, what do? Do you drop into zone? Do you play man and allow Chauncey Gardner-Johnson to man him up? But then what do you do at safety? Do you spin to single high? Do you play quarter, half? I'm interested to see what the Eagles try to do to take away Justin Jefferson and make Kirk Cousins move on to his second read. Now, hopefully, the Eagles are able to affect Kirk Cousins with their rush. The Vikings' interior offensive line just isn't very good. But honestly, I'm tired of talking about teams' interior offensive lines not being good and then the Eagles' pass rush not getting home anyways. It seems like all last season we did this. It's a clear advantage in the trenches, and it makes no impact. That said, last week I thought Josh Sweat played a pretty good game. Jared Goff just got the ball out of his hands so fast. He had the fastest time to throw in the league. Now, Kirk Cousins tends to hold on to the ball. He had the 8th slowest time to throw in week 1, and he does that to allow Jefferson to attack downfield. And so if the Eagles can get pressure from the interior, if they can get Hassan Reddick coming off the edge, Josh Sweat coming off the edge, and they can make Kirk Cousins uncomfortable, they can make him get the ball out quicker, it will greatly limit the damage that Justin Jefferson is going to be able to do. And so the pass rush and the coverage need to be married on the back end, and that's something the Eagles haven't done very well so far this year. Another thing to watch is the Vikings running game. The Eagles tackling was really bad in week 1. And part of that is on players missing tackles. Part of it is on the defensive structure that put players in disadvantageous situations. Dalvin Cook is a really good running back, and I think there could be a continued problem there. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson especially was bad tackling in week 1. And so hopefully with, a week behind him now playing out of the slot, not something he's done a lot in the past, hopefully he gets a little more comfortable attacking downhill and can fit the run a little better and be able to rally and make these tackles. There's a lot of hype around this game. This is, I think it was the number 6 and number 7 teams in my power rankings facing off. And it's two teams that they have serious playoff aspirations. The Vikings just exercised their Green Bay Packers demon. They're leading their division. The Eagles are tied for the lead in their division. This is two teams whose arrows are pointing up early in the season. This is a game where we can learn a lot about these teams. I would love to come on here on a post-game show or on All 22 next week and break down all the cool things that Jonathan Gannon did to take away Justin Jefferson. Whether it be bracketing him with coverage, whether it be putting James Bradbury on him to jam him hard and then sink into his zone underneath him, different sorts of concepts that the Eagles could run. But let's be honest, Jonathan Gannon's not going to do that. He's going to come into this game. He's going to play soft zone coverage. He's going to play off-man coverage. And Jefferson is going to roast the Eagles in the first half. And so they're going to go into halftime, and I'm going to come on a halftime show, and I'm going to tell you about the adjustments they need to make. Meanwhile, Jonathan Gannon is going to go into the locker room, have a cup of coffee, make no adjustments, and the same thing is going to happen in the second half. Until Jonathan Gannon shows me something on the defense, I just can't predict that the defense is going to be able to stop a good offense. Kirk Cousins is an above average quarterback in the NFL. Justin Jefferson is an elite receiver. Dalvin Cook is an elite running back. And yes, the Eagles have the matchup advantage in the trenches, but how many times has that not mattered? I just can't, in good faith, I can't take the Eagles in this game. So I'm picking the Vikings to win this game, hoping to see good things from the offense, expecting to see good things from the offense. I just don't think they're going to be able to keep pace with the numbers that the Vikings are going to put up. So I think there's a very different discourse about this Eagles team following Monday, especially about the defense. So I'm picking a shootout in this one, but I think the Vikings come out on top. So now let's move into the Thursday night game. This is another game that is a great matchup, probably the game of the week. This is the number 2 and number 3 team in my power rankings. This one should also be a shootout. Last season, the Chargers and the Chiefs split their series. They both won road games. They won in each other's stadiums, and there was an average of 58 points scored in those two games. Now, in week 1, the Chiefs put on a show against a Cardinals defense that honestly just isn't very good, while the Chargers slugged it out with the Raiders. Now, there's some good things to take away from the Chargers in that game. And one is that they're not going to have to blitz like the Cardinals did, partially because they know it won't work, and partially because Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack means that they won't have to. They can drop 7, and they can still get after Patrick Mahomes. They may even be able to drop 8. Now, a lot of this game, how I feel about it depends on if J.C. Jackson is able to play, and I haven't heard on that yet. I just think this will be a much stronger test for the Chiefs offense. I don't know that we got a good read on it other than, they're going to be good. Just are they going to be as good as they were against the Cardinals? I don't think they're putting up 44 points on the Chargers. I just don't think the Chargers are going to beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead on a primetime game, Thursday Night Football. And so I think this is going to be a great game. I think both of these teams are still going to be in the top 3 or 4 of the power rankings next week, but one of them has to lose. And this is a huge game in this division. It's going to set the tone for who is in contention for the 1 seed and who's playing for a wild card so early in the year in week 2. I'm so glad this is a Thursday night game, but I'm going to take the Chiefs in this one in a shootout that's going to have you on the edge of your seat. Moving on to Sunday, we have the Miami Dolphins traveling to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. Now, these are similar teams in week 1. They both had struggling running games. The Ravens only ran for 8 yards in the whole first half. They both had really good defensive showings against really poor offenses. Miami made the Patriots look really bad. The Ravens made the Jets look really bad. The question is, what is going to happen now that they're actually playing teams with playoff aspirations? This is going to be a big test for Lamar. Lamar Jackson is going to be facing a really good Dolphins defense that does a lot of different things. They like to blitz. The question is, do you want to blitz Lamar Jackson with his legs? He can make you pay if you do that. You can't play a lot of man coverage against Lamar Jackson. So the Dolphins are going to have to play some zone. I'm sure they'll try to dial up some zone pressures, but it will limit what they can do just because of his running ability. As of right now, it's expected that J.K. Dobbins is going to play in this game, which is going to be a big boost for the Ravens running game that was down not just Dobbins, but also Gus Edwards. So they were down their top 2 running backs a week ago against the Jets. As for Miami, I just don't think they're going to be able to run the ball. They don't have a very good offensive line. They were able to mitigate that with their passing game. I just don't think they're going to be able to run against this Ravens front. And so if it turns into a one-dimensional slugfest, let's just say the Ravens can't run the ball. They can't get it going with J.K. Dobbins back. If it turns into a one-dimensional slugfest between quarterbacks against really good defenses, who do you trust more between Tua and Lamar? I trust Lamar. Even though Tua has the weapons, he's got Tyreek Hill, he's got Jalen Waddle, and Lamar doesn't have that. He's got Mark Andrews. Devin Duvernay caught some touchdowns in week 1. Rashad Bateman. Lamar doesn't have the weapons, but I think he has I think he's the better quarterback. And so I'm going to take the Ravens at home in this game. If it was in Miami, I would probably lean a little closer to Miami, but I'm still going to take the Ravens either way. I like their ability to scheme things around Lamar that the Dolphins just can't do for their quarterback for Tua. So got Joe Ciccoletti chiming in, the floating head of Shane giving picks out. Yeah, my shirt's green, and I didn't realize that till I started. So I'm going to have to not wear green shirts on the podcast anymore. So he says, I like the Ravens, the Pats, and Tennessee with the points. So I have the Ravens. I just made the Ravens pick, and I will get into those other ones here in just a couple minutes. So let's move on to another game here. We've got the New York Jets traveling to Cleveland to take on the Browns. This is Jacoby Brissett versus Joe Flacco. This is must-see, riveting TV. I mean, I don't know what you do with this game. This game shouldn't be interesting at all. The Jets booed Joe Flacco off the field at the end of their last game. I think the Browns win this one because they have a running game, and the Jets, I just don't trust what they have with Joe Flacco. If Zach Wilson was playing, maybe. But I think Cleveland showed you what they're going to be without Deshaun Watson. They're going to be a run-heavy team. Jacoby Brissett is a fine backup quarterback. He's not going to lose you a lot of games. He's not going to win you a lot of games. And I think playing the Jets, you would have to do something to lose the game. And I just don't see that happening. So I'll take Cleveland in this one. I really don't have a lot of other talking points on this one other than just expect some really bad quarterback play here. Okay, moving on to the Washington Commanders traveling to Jacksonville to take on, or sorry, not traveling to Jacksonville, traveling to Detroit to take on the Lions. This is an interesting matchup for a common opponent to set a baseline between Washington and Philly. After Dak Prescott's injury, and really even before Dak's injury with how bad the Cowboys looked week 1, Washington and Philly have to be considered the 2 top contenders in the NFC East. So it'll be interesting to get a baseline of how Washington plays Detroit at Detroit, just like the Eagles did in week 1, to see if they struggle with some of the things the Eagles struggled with, to see how they handle that adversity and kind of give a baseline of comparison here. The Washington offense just has a lot of good pieces. They've got, Terry McLaurin, who Wasn't even one of their top 2 receiving weapons week 1, but he's by far their best receiver. It just shows you how they're able to spread the ball around. They finally started to use Antonio Gibson the right way. They got him 7 receptions, used him as a receiver out of the backfield. The Lions, for their part, they shouldn't be able to run the ball into the Washington defensive front like they did against the Eagles. Washington's got a stout defensive front, which is something we thought about the Eagles. And so if the Lions are able to run the ball on Washington, maybe it tells us more about the Washington rushing attack than it does about either of these defensive fronts. We'll just have to wait and see. But I don't believe they're going to be able to run the ball that way. And I just don't think Jared Goff can go win this game. Now, the biggest fear I have here is for Carson Wentz facing the blitz of the Lions. We saw the Lions blitz Jalen Hurts time and time again, and Hurts has the mobility to get away. Carson Wentz does not have that mobility anymore, but he also does not like to take those checkdowns. He's got a tendency to play hero ball, and we've seen that lead to turnovers. So I think Washington wins this game. I have money on the Washington money line in this game, which my bets went 1-4 last week, so maybe don't use my betting advice. Maybe you should bet the other side. But I've got money on the Washington money line here. I think unless Carson Wentz has a titanic game, they should be able to walk out of Detroit with a win. Now on to the next game that I was switching opponents here. We've got Indianapolis traveling to Jacksonville. A lot of storylines for this game. This is the Frank Reich revenge game. I mean, he's 0-4 in Jacksonville. Last year, he lost the Week 18 game to stay out of the playoffs. It's Frank Reich versus Doug Peterson, the mentor and the protege. I like Jacksonville in this game. I think we learned a lot about Indianapolis against the Texans. And yes, I know it's week 1. Weird things happen, but it's the Texans. They were expected to have the number 1 pick, and you tied against them. The offense didn't look great. I don't think Matt Ryan is nearly the quarterback he used to be. And I just trust Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson more than I trust Trevor Lawrence more than I trust Matt Ryan is what it ultimately comes down to. I don't think either one of them have tremendous supporting casts. The Colts have a better roster than Jacksonville, but Jacksonville has certainly been improved. I'm going to take Jacksonville. They are +4 in this game, but I actually took the Jacksonville money line because I think they're going to win this one outright. Moving on to Tampa Bay at New Orleans. This is another revenge game, I guess you could say. Tom Brady has really struggled against the Saints over the last few years. He's won when it counted in the playoffs, but he's had a really hard time in the regular season. So we'll see what happens here. I'm not terribly concerned for Tampa because the Saints would have lost to the Falcons in week 1 if they didn't. I don't know. I guess we could just say if they didn't Falcon, blowing another 15-plus point lead. It's a continual issue for the Falcons. They should have beaten the Saints. And again, the Falcons, we were expecting to have a really high pick. I just don't think the Saints are that great of a football team. And you look at what the Bucs did to Dak Prescott. Yes, Dak didn't have the greatest weapons, but that defense was stifling. And they're going to be facing a team that has better weapons than the Cowboys. The Saints have Michael Thomas and Chris Olave and Jarvis Landry, but they have a worse quarterback, and Todd Bowles knows how to scheme defense. I think he's going to be able to bait Jameis into some interceptions, some turnovers, and ultimately, I still don't have a lot of faith in this New Orleans team. Now, if they're able to win, if they get out to this 2-0 start, maybe we'll have to start having a conversation about the Saints, but I really think the Buccaneers are going to go on the road and handle this one. And so I have Tampa Bay. I'm laying 2.5 points in this game, so I've got money on Tampa Bay -2.5. Moving on to Carolina at the New York Giants. Matt Rule is in a dark place, folks. Knowing he's coaching for his job, he loses his week 1 game, but he did dig up this stat for us that he told reporters. He said the Panthers averaged 7.7 yards per play in the last 35 minutes of the game, which would have been 3rd in the NFL if, games were only 35 minutes long. Unfortunately, they're not. And the Panthers lost their opener to the Browns. And so now they face the Giants on the road. And Matt Rule is a bad football coach. He's a bad football coach that's going to get fired before this year is over. And he knows it. His players probably know it. The fans know it. That's a hard thing to coach with that hanging over your head. It's why you should not do the lame duck coaching thing. On the flip side, you have a guy who's finally gotten his shot at the head coach, Brian Daboll. And he won over his team against the Titans week 1 with the decision to go for 2 in the win last week. And it worked out. And I loved that aggressive mentality. This isn't a team that, is going to go to the Super Bowl. They probably don't have, I'm sure they have playoff aspirations, but they don't have realistic playoff aspirations. To have that aggressiveness, your players want to go for that, to put that faith in them. I really like that. I like the message that it sends. Saquon Barkley appeared to be back last week. And if Saquon can be back to the back that he's supposed to be, it's a huge boost for this offense, who doesn't have a good quarterback. They don't have the best offensive line, but if Saquon can make things happen and take that pressure off, it gives them a place to go when Daniel Jones starts to struggle. Now, on the flip side, the Panthers also have a really good running back in Christian McCaffrey, and the Giants don't have a linebacker that could cover McCaffrey. But they really don't have to if Baker ignores him again this week. Baker Mayfield did not target Christian McCaffrey enough last week. They didn't hand him the ball enough. He's the best player on that offense. They've got to utilize him. If the Giants can win this game, they've got easy games in week 3 and 4. And you could be talking about the 4-0 New York Giants. Unfortunately, I don't think that happens. I think this is a little bit of a letdown game for the Giants. After the emotionally charged thing and going for 2 in the win, I think this is a prime spot for them to drop this game. So I'm going to take Carolina in this one. Both teams end up at 1-1 after this game. Now let's talk about the Patriots at the Steelers. This was the game that Joe chimed in the chat and said that he really likes the Pats in this game. I'm not sure if you mean against the spread, if you mean outright, but let's dig into it here. So the Patriots got lit up in week 1 by the Dolphins defense. A Dolphins defense that likes to bring pressure. They like to play aggressive. The Steelers do the same thing. Now, TJ Watt is out, and that really hurts, but this Steelers defense is really good. They sacked Joe Burrow 7 times. They forced a fumble of Joe Burrow. They intercepted him 4 times. You look at New England, for their part, their offensive line is bad. The Cole Strange pick was bad. He couldn't even start. He's rotating. Their secondary is bad, and to be honest, their coaching is bad all the way to the top. Like I said this on the review show, it's time to have a conversation about Bill Belichick. He is in over his head. He's been such a good coach for so long, and he's lost that. And I don't think that's coming back. I think it could be a rough go for Patriots fans this year. And on the road in Pittsburgh, I think Pittsburgh does enough to win this game. I'm ready for them to go to Kenny Pickett. Pickett should be the starter in this game, not Mitch Trubisky. He was not good in week 1. But even without TJ Watt, I think this defense is good enough to, if the offense will score 14 points, they should have a shot to win this game. And I think they can do that, especially against this Patriots secondary. So I'll take Pittsburgh in this one, and I put money on Pittsburgh +2 in this game. And now we are on to the afternoon slate. We have the Atlanta Falcons going to Los Angeles to take on the Rams. And let's just be honest, is there any lead that the Falcons could get in this game that would make you feel safe if you're a Falcons fan? I can't imagine that there would be. For the Rams, they looked lost in the opener. And granted, they were playing the Bills, who are a Super Bowl favorite right now, but they had 3 extra days to get ready for this one. And I think that McVay will have spent that time. He'll put it to a good use. What did the Bills do that gave the Rams trouble? They got constant pressure with only 4 guys. Well, Atlanta doesn't have the front 4 to expose a shaky offensive line that the Rams currently have. And if you want to bring the blitz, which is what Dean Pease likes to do for the Falcons, Stafford's really good against the blitz. He always has been. And so I just don't see this as a good matchup. I think Atlanta will put some points up. I think the Rams defense is not as good as we remember it having been in the past. And the Falcons run this college-y style of offense that's actually kind of fun to watch. I think they're going to go on some drives. They're going to put up some points, but I think the Rams ultimately win this game. Now, I don't have money on this, but the spread is 10, and I think it's too big. I just wasn't willing to take Atlanta and the points, given those extra days of preparation for McVay's offense. So I'm taking the Rams. I'm interested in that line, but I haven't talked myself into pulling the trigger yet. Let's move on to another game that I have convinced myself to pull the trigger on the money or on the betting line, and that is Seattle traveling to San Francisco. Seattle is an 8.5-point underdog in this game, and I am taking the points in this one. Pete Carroll is 8-2 against Kyle Shanahan in his coaching career. But to be fair, he's coming off a short week on Monday Night Football, an emotional game where he beat Russell Wilson. And, there's the whole reports about Wilson on the field talking to all the players and stuff. And he and Pete Carroll didn't even acknowledge each other. It was an emotionally charged thing, and you're often primed for a letdown there. He's got a lesser team. But when you look at the quarterbacks, Geno Smith is the safer quarterback. Trey Lance has a lot of tools, and presumably they're not going to play in a monsoon this time, but Geno Smith is the safer option. And so Trey Lance could have a great game. He could also really struggle, as rookies, which is what he essentially is, tend to do. And so I think the 49ers win this one. I think it's a close game. I think that spread of 8.5 is too big for the uncertainty at the quarterback position for the 49ers. So I'm picking the 49ers to win, but I'm going to take the points on Seattle as 8.5 points underdogs. Moving on to Cincinnati at Dallas. And honestly, there's not a ton to talk about with this one. The Cowboys looked dreadful in week 1, and that was before Dak got hurt and is going to miss extended time. Now, the Bengals had their share of problems, but when you're -5 in turnovers and you take 7 sacks and you still get to overtime, that tells you something. And they shouldn't have even been in overtime if they didn't let an extra point get blocked. Like, there's so many things that happened in this game that Cincinnati should have won and they didn't. And you just won't have that bad of a luck every week. I think Cincy wins this one easy. I don't think this one's particularly close, but it will be interesting to me to watch how the Cincinnati offensive line holds up to Micah Parsons. They were not awful a week ago, but there was a ton of sacks of Joe Burrow. He was he really wasn't under pressure that much. He just got sacked almost every time he was under pressure. To see if Cincinnati can clean that up and get their offense back on track. So Cincinnati wins this one. I think they do it pretty easily, but I am interested to watch how this offense functions after being beat up by the Steelers a week ago. Moving on, we have the Houston Texans at the Denver Broncos. And Denver in that Monday night game, so they're coming off of a short week, they moved the ball at will. They just couldn't put it in the end zone. They had 3 goal-to-go situations, and they fumbled twice and kicked a field goal. So 3 points with 3 goal-to-go situations. Now, could that happen again? Maybe. It's not likely, and it's even less likely against the Texans. So I don't think this indicates Denver's red zone offense is going to be bad. It's certainly something to monitor if it becomes a pattern. I just think it was a lot of bad luck wrapped up into one game, and bad luck tends to regress to the mean. So I expect Denver to be able to move the ball again, but actually convert points on some of these drives. And the Texans, they put up a big fight against Indy, and they walked out with a tie after one of the probably the most cowardly decision you'll see this year, punting on a 4th and 3 with 30 seconds left in the game from midfield. Like, why are you playing for a tie if you're the Texans? Go try to win the football game. That can't sit well with players. It's just such a cowardly way to play. So I could see that coming back. That's bad juju, bad momentum rolling into this week. For the Texans, Davis Mills continues to be interesting to watch, but Denver has a superior roster in every way in this game. And I just can't see Denver not getting the win at home in this one. So they get to 1-1. The Texans fall to 0-1 after the week 1 tie. 3 games left. Let's go on to another one. The Arizona Cardinals traveling to Las Vegas to take on the Raiders. The Raiders are better at every position except quarterback, in my opinion. And Kyler Murray, he's not going to be able to carry this team. He's not going to be able to carry his head coach anymore. I think the Carr to Devontae Adams connection is strong, and I don't know how the Cards stop it with their defense. And even if they do this, they still have Hunter Renfrow. They have Darren Waller, guys that didn't get enough targets last week. And you've got to imagine that Carr is going to be adjusting that, dialing that in this week. And so I don't see how the Cardinals are going to stop the Raiders' passing attack. And on the offensive side, I don't see how the Cardinals are going to be able to put up a lot of points. Like, they put up 21 on the Chiefs. 14 was in the 4th quarter when it didn't matter at all. If I'm the Raiders, I would bring a lot of pressure at Kyler Murray in this one. I would try to make him uncomfortable, get him on the run. And obviously, you don't want him to be able to gash you for 100 yards or something, but you want to move him off his spot. You want to make him be uncomfortable and feel like he's got to do this one himself. And so if I was the Raiders, I would be bringing some blitzes in this game and just trying to let the Cardinals offense implode on itself. So I've got the Raiders in this one. I think they win at home against the Cardinals. On to Sunday Night Football, where the Chicago Bears travel after their week 1 win over the 49ers. They travel to Lambeau Field to take on Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. Aaron Rodgers has not lost a home game to the Bears since Barack Obama was president. And he hasn't thrown an interception against them in that time either. He always brings it against the Bears, to the point that, he had the thing a couple years ago where he told the Bears fans, "I own you." And so Rodgers knows this is a big game for them. After dropping the game to the Vikings, they get another divisional game. This is a must-win game for the Packers. They got smoked by the Vikings, and I just can't see them playing as poorly in another divisional game in week 2. The Packers were missing both David Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins, both of their tackles. They might get them back. They've both been limited in practice. It seems like maybe Jenkins is trending towards playing and Bakhtiari is trending towards not. But obviously we don't know that for sure. Alan Lazard has been a limited participant. Getting him back would be huge after Christian Watson kind of proved he couldn't be trusted yet. And we all know how Aaron Rodgers is with young receivers that drop passes. And so getting Alan Lazard back would be a big thing for the Packers offense. For the Bears, it's a test for them. They won a game, a slugfest in the monsoon. They were a disciplined football team. They got pressure on Trey Lance. Aaron Rodgers is a far cry from Trey Lance. So the question is, can they get pressure on him on defense? On the offensive side, how will their offensive line hold up? It wasn't terrible against the 49ers. How's Justin Fields going to do as he continues to settle into being the quarterback? He started really poor in the first half, but they got the win. Ultimately, I think Justin Fields probably plays okay in this game, but it's not going to be enough to take down the Packers. And so the Packers will get this win, setting both of these teams at 1-1. And then on to the first of the 2 Monday night games. We've already covered the Eagles one on the front end. This is the Tennessee Titans traveling to Buffalo to take on the Bills. This is the Bills who have extra rest. And so they went from Thursday night now all the way to Monday night. And so they have 4 extra days of rest over Tennessee. Sometimes when you look at a game like this, all you have to do is look at the quarterback matchup. Josh Allen versus Ryan Tannehill tells you about all you need to know in this game. Josh Allen looked incredible last Thursday night, flawlessly executing the quick game. And then when the shots were there, he took them and he delivered. The Titans are missing probably their most important offensive and defensive piece from a year ago, with Harold Landry hurt, A.J. Brown gone. I just don't think they're going to be able to keep pace with the Bills in this one. I think the Bills win this game, and I think they're going to win it pretty convincingly at home in front of what's going to be a crazy Buffalo crowd after what Buffalo did on the road in week 1. So those are the picks. Hopefully they go good this week, at least better than last week when I went 7-8-1 and my gambling picks went 1-4. Again, this week my picks in gambling is I've got the Steelers +2, Seattle +8.5, Tampa Bay -2.5, and then I have the Washington and Jacksonville money lines. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the show, this week 2 preview. Our preview shows are always going to be shorter than our review shows. I just want to give you a few talking points and a prediction for each game. Be sure you're following me on Twitter if you're not, at @halfandhalf_TPL. I've been putting out all 22 content and advanced stats stuff for the Eagles. I tweet things about other teams too, so if you're a fan of another team, you'll still find some things there from me, just not the depth that I provide in Eagles coverage. So be sure you're following me on Twitter. Thank you for joining for episode number 70 of Chalk Talk. Thank you to those of you that were in the comments. I like to interact with you guys on the show. And if you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It really does help us out. Like I said before, you can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL for a lot of content throughout the week. Be sure you're following the Painted Lines. Be sure you're following Mark. Hopefully he'll be back on Tuesday on another review show to celebrate an Eagles victory. So from me, from the Painted Lines, we will see you guys next time.